The subjective nature of the social sciences, being largely confined to narrative prose, has been a long-standing problem for science. In this essay it will be demonstrated conclusively that Scripture provides the solution to the anecdotal nature of the social sciences. The problem we seek to resolve is the problem of how we, as researchers, can harden the humanities, that is, quantify the social sciences. To have the social sciences perform at the same level as the hard or physical sciences, a unit of measure is needed. Quantification is required for objectivity. To not have an accurate unit of measure is like attempting to build a house, by guessing at the length of the pieces being cut. There is a line drawn between the hard and soft sciences based on the ability of one group to quantify their subject matter and the inability of the other to do this. The hard sciences are quantitative, the soft are primarily narrative. Social scientists even resort to anecdotal evidence to prove or at least, give credence, to a proposition. But subjective arguments never serve to give an argument the credibility that quantifiable tests do. When the argument is subjective in nature, the other person always has questions. Narrative and anecdotal arguments are never conclusive and rarely even convincing. Now one of the strongest and most pervasive reasons given for the success of the physical sciences, is their denial of metaphysics. The hard sciences observe and measure physical factors. The argument made by empiricists, is that if it is not physical it cannot be measured, and if there is no way to measure a phenomenon, it may as well not exist. The physical sciences maintain this position even as the evidence mounts that what is measured is disembodied forces, and forces have no real existence, other than in the impact they have on each other. In other words, we do not measure things, or actuals, we measure impacts, we measure the strength of a force. Without their ability to be quantified or without some kind of quantification, physical phenomenon would not have existence. It is the passage of time that makes time real, as it is the distance of space that gives space its form. If we could not measure the distance of space, it would not have volume. It is the measure of things that gives reality the substance and form we think it has, and measurements are products of human ingenuity. Time and space are separate qualities, but neither exists except when compared to the other. Space is after all nothing more than the time it takes for matter to move from point A to point B. Space measures time and time measures space. Without time, space would not exist. The passage of time is defined by various clocks. Time is the interval between two distinct points in space. Space needs its own measuring tools tied to fundamentals linked to the passage of time. There is nothing physical or objective about these systems of measurement. Despite their accuracy and replicability, they are as artificial as beauty, which has both a physical and mental basis. The inch is comparable to the millimeter, but we cannot find them in nature. The charge of the electron is a measurement used in physics, but the charge as a unit, registers on a dial that was created by man. The dollar is a unit of account, yet we notice it does not behave like a mile or a gram. We all know what a mile is, or a gram or yard. These measurements have a standard, whereas the dollar is worth what anyone says it is. The unit of account used by markets the world over, has no actual value. The dollar is just a term we use to quantify the values of things. $10 is the value of something which the seller says is worth $10. We can write down in an account book that our assets are worth $10 million or $10,000. It is just a number in a credit column and means nothing in the end. This might seem an insurmountable problem. It is often said that a product is worth what we say it is. We say the right price is whatever the market will bear. These are nods to the relativity of price points. But think back to why money was created. A cow is worth so many chickens, but both the value of the cow and the value of chickens can change, and if one changes then the other also changes. Barter values are relative, and so to say the dollar can be given an objective value is like saying cows can be given an objective value in terms of chickens. But if cigarettes were used as a currency, or gold, scarcity in either would inflate the value of everything else. This is the problem with the gold standard. The easiest way to make money when gold is used as a currency, is to stop using or spending gold. The relative scarcity of gold when hoarded, makes the value of the gold in circulation, increase. The more gold that is hoarded compared to the gold in circulation, the higher the value of gold relative to all other goods and services. But this is the point and the explanation for why gold is no longer used as a currency. Dollars replaced gold in the market but did not solve the problem. Dollars tightened, because of increased interest rates, makes dollars scarce and their value goes up, compared to other products and services. We could probably look at the dollar, gold and alternative currencies for decades and not figure out the problem, let alone a solution. It is not that the issue is complicated. The problem is a moral one and people are reticent about looking at moral problems in a serious way. Money did permit us to digitalize trade products and services, but it did not actually replace barter, unless one thinks of barter as a negotiation between buyer and seller. Currency lets us put a precise price on what we sell. But the end of the need to negotiate exchange rates between products is due more to the introduction of a digital product than the elimination of asset-to-asset exchanges. The dollar or other currency is just another product, but one that can be used as a medium of exchange, because of its ability to be divided. Money is still a product, and it is still exchanged for other products. Modern currencies are not really a measure of value in the way inches measure length. This is important to understand. No one goes to the measuring authority to buy inches or yards or miles the way we work or go to a bank to get currency units. A mile is just a number that is recorded on an odometer as we travel. A foot is a length we measure dimensional lumber in, to give us accuracy in constructing homes and other structures. We must buy money because money is not a system of measurement, but a good produced to provide a service. However, currency is not purchased for its service but for its value as a commodity. We expend energy and sell goods and services to get money because it is an infinitely divisible product. The size of currency can be modified to exactly match the value of other goods and services. Money is an infinitely malleable product in terms of its size and therefore, value. So, money performs work as a service, but it is also a product like all other products. Like water, money can dissolve all other goods and services. $230 is a product that is equal in value to all goods and services that are sold for $230. However, we have to understand this unit of exchange is no different from a chicken or cow or gold nugget, in any other way than its level of divisibility. A dollar can be divided into far more units than can a chicken, and each unit is exactly equal to every other unit. The closest we came to creating an objective system of pricing was the introduction of the labor theory of value. It did not become a pricing model because too many people pointed out it failed to account for capital, that is the investment portion. This is an interesting observation, but no one understands the irony conveyed in the criticism. It is not difficult to understand that if 10 hours of work are done, the worker deserves to be able to exchange the value of this labor for an equal value of work done by others. It would be interesting to find someone who can debate or qualify this truth. It is even a biblical truth. The worker is worthy of his wages. What can a worker's wage be, but an equal amount of labor done by others? But this equivalence creates a problem for the advocates of public ownership, human rights and capitalism. If there are only two people in an exchange and they exchange the product of their labor using a 1-1 equivalence, where is the tax, where is the owner's capital? There is no surplus in a system using the labor theory of value. Regardless of how we justify taxation and owner's capital, these categories are not biblical and are incompatible with a worker getting the wages he deserves. But let's notice that in a market using the labor theory of value, money has no substance or economic value. The labor theory of value only works when money is just a number, in the way other systems of measurement use numbers. But we will look at the justifiers for taxation and owner's capital. Taxation and capital are usually considered separately, but the gist of this argument is the nature of money, and from this perspective, even though taxation is a stripping of value and capital is viewed as an addition of value, in the end capital belongs to the capitalist and is not available to the worker, though what is earned belongs to labor. Looking at taxation, we see the state extract wealth from labor. But if there are only workers and all value created belongs to them, taxation makes no sense. To justify taxation, we do not just need the state as the aggressor, we need a victim. The idea of social product or commonwealth only makes sense as if there is a person being deprived of what is rightfully theirs to benefit a victim who has rights bestowed on them by the state. Charity is when a worker gives to a needy person, part of what he, as a worker, has earned. The needy person does not necessarily deserve the help he or she gets. The merit goes to the person giving the charity. But when governments give to the needy, the situation is different. The worker forced to give up part of his income to help the needy is, in the view of the state, the bad guy. The worker has gained wealth he has no right to. So, the state is, in an act of justice, taking what is an illicit gain, from the laborer and giving this or a portion of it, to the person in need who, in the eyes of the state, is the victim. But it does not end there because the state does not have the means to finance the giving nor the administrative act of taxation. So, the worker not only has to subsidize the needs of the perceived victim, but the system of justice that levies costs onto him and benefits onto his neighbor. Therefore the dynamic of two workers sharing the proceeds of their labor is eliminated and we have a community in which one group labors and another group freeloads with the blessing and assistance of the state. This schema is highly simplified, but if we take away the complexities, at some point the community will divide into three groups: the worker, the taker, and the enabler state. So, now let's look at the case of capital, which is a more interesting and entrenched case. Few people try and argue the investor is not entitled to a return on his investment. But where did the investment come from? Imagine Amed, who comes into the country and borrows $1 million. He purchases a factory and hires people to work. From this he earns a return with which he pays off his debt and his other expenses. This makes it seem as if Amed is justified in withholding part of the income earned by his employees back. But technically he could withhold so much back, that he is able to purchase factory after factory until he owns the entire output of the nation, without ever doing any actual work. But if all he has done is borrow money and buy what others produced or built up, what justification is there for Amed owning the productive capacity of the nation? Does he not become, by virtue of his economic importance, a dictator of the nation? Who could oppose him? This is only one aspect of the problem. What if Amed borrowed funds to purchase an old-growth forest, and workers to cut and saw these old-growth trees, reaping considerable wealth as a result? Why ought Amed benefit from something he never had a hand in creating? Yet we can go deeper still. And this gets closer to the heart of the real problem, or the problem as it rears its ugly head as was first depicted in the Garden of Eden. What if Joe has done well and built up quite an empire for himself and Amed comes along with a gripe that references historic wrongs? The modern equivalent of this are seen in accusations by some that their ancestors were enslaved, genocide, oppressed, suppressed, delegitimized and put at a disadvantage, meaning that all of Joe's success has been built on the systemic oppression of Amed. What if the ancestors of Amed had originally been the inhabitants of this land and Joe's ancestors had taken this land, dispossessed the ancestors of Amed and perhaps enslaved them? After generations the ancestors of Joe were powerful and rich, and the ancestors of Amed were destitute and driven to serving Joe and his family. Is there not justification for repartitions, or some form of compensation? The argument is often made that Joe, and his ancestors, had no right to enslave or dispossess Amed and his ancestors. But even so, that does not generate a claim on Joe, let alone his ancestors. Amed would first have to prove he had a right to justice. The case is similar to drug dealers taking someone to court for refusing to pay for his drugs. The claims of Amed are founded on the assumption that they had a right to what was taken. But where did they get this right and what is this right based on? The answer is that the rights of Amed and his ancestors to the land is based on the same right exercised by Joe and his ancestors. Which means the party to the first part and the party of the second part both gained their rights through the interposition of the law of the jungle. The rights of man to physical property is simply a utilization of the rights given to man by physical prowess. This is an application of the law of the jungle. Power merchants claim might makes right and the end justifies the means. Only when we reject this law and the right to anything we did not create can we find a solution to this predicament. The uncomfortable truth is that God brooks no fools. We either live by the rule of God or not. God does not permit compromise. Christians are attempting to live by impressions. We want to look good. We live by our conception of faith, not by works. But it is our works that convey our faith. Works are the measure of faith, for as we add value, we build the church, and by this means we are bound on earth in a way that binds us in heaven. The creation of wealth can be measured if we abide by the biblical concept of the labor theory of value. Therefore, everything we do is done by someone, and everything we do is an expenditure of labor, which has a value. Therefore, what we do can be quantified and validated according to the labor theory of value. This means all of the humanities can be interpreted as a form of expending energy and labor and given a value according to how much work is expended. What we do either earns value or not. The value that is earned defines the truth and value of the work done. This quantification of our work and the measure of the value we create through work is sufficient to quantify, therefore harden, the social sciences.